Hello, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Jenkins. I am the Community Relations Officer for the Delaware Developmental Disabilities Council. If you have not already followed our channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Ring the bell. That way you never miss an episode of Let's Talk About It. Today, I am super thrilled. We know that November the 5th is one of the most crucial days in this country. Not only in this country, but in our state. And that is the 2024 election. And today I have the pleasure of talking with one of Delaware's candidates for Lieutenant Governor for the state of Delaware. I am joined by Miss Ruth Briggs King today. Thank you so much for joining our show.
It's my pleasure to be with you and your viewers.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we get into the list of questions that I have and our conversation, so viewers can become more familiar with you and your vision and your desire and your will to serve our great state of Delaware, tell me a little bit about yourself and just something that the viewers may not know from viewing this video.
Okay. I think one of the things when we talk about abilities, and notice I don't like to say disabilities, I think it's ability to do things. As a child, I quickly learned, that my dad, some people looked at my dad differently. It was just my dad to me. My dad always had this very can-do attitude rather than cannot do. And many times people would try to limit him, but he would not limit himself. Before I was born, my dad had an accident and lost his right arm. And that meant he had to learn to do many things over again or do them differently. He would get upset if people would call him disabled because he thought he was able to do many things, and he didn't necessarily like that label. My mother, one of my early recollections, is fussing with me because when I wanted to be with my dad a lot, as a lot of girls do. And so I was always either pulling on his pant pocket or his belt loop on that right side because dad couldn't hold my left hand. It was the only hand he had, and, to open doors or drive or whatever. So I was always pulling on my dad's right side, on that pocket or on that door. But it's one of those things I saw, him go through many things, and sometimes how people would look at him differently or look with a question mark or whatever. And my dad certainly didn't want that kind of sympathy or special attention. Two things that frustrated him: tying his shoes and walking through a buffet line because you can't hold your plate and serve yourself if there wasn't somebody there. But my dad was a farmer, and he learned to use his equipment. He was very politically engaged. And for me, he was just like any other dad. And so we've carried that with us over the years, of that sense of ability, and helping them. Many years later, my husband became disabled in his early 40s from a severe, massive kind of heart attack. And some people go through things you can't see. You can't openly look at a person and tell what might be going on inside or what other challenges. And so, I learned over the years not to take things for granted and to see a little bit different. I was first elected to the legislature in 2009 and have steadfastly seen the advancements we have made in the community and the ability or disability community ability network, whether it be working with autism or working with other special needs. In my neighborhood, growing up, I was fortunate that one of my neighbor's children, Melissa, also was born with spinal bifida, and we have watched her mature, get jobs. And I know from her mom those things that are very important to her, and so it's with that mindset of having lived through different experiences myself, being mindful, being determined that we were going to get the McNesby Act funded, being determined that we're going to work on that holistic approach, helping my folks in my district that want to work and don't live on a fixed bus route, and how expensive and, you know, how difficult it can be for them to get to work. And then looking at what we're doing in education. So, you know, it's that big perspective. I will share with you one final thing is a couple of years ago, my granddaughters were accepted into a program at the Howard Tiana School where they were matched in preschool with a student that had special needs. And I was so happy to see them learn that empathy, but also they don't look at someone as what they can't do. They look at what they can do, and we're going to try these things together. And I just think how wonderful if all kids could have that kind of experience at an early age. So that's just a little bit about me. I want to continue to work on some of these things, look at what we can do, not what we can do, and look at the possibilities that we have here in Delaware.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. You touched on maybe 6 of the questions I got, which we will dive a little deeper. So thank you for that. Can you share your long-term vision when it comes to improving accessibility and inclusion for those with disabilities, you know, across the state of Delaware, if you're elected Lieutenant Governor?
I think it's important, first of all, rather than me telling you what you need, is for me to listen and to make sure that we have stakeholders and their families at the table when we're making important decisions. Years ago, I heard the expression that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I just really think that we lead best when we lead from the bottom up. And to me, it's being in the right place, like engaging with you and listening, going to different things, pulling groups together to say, what do we need? What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? And if I were to just sit back and look at it, I would think, once again, I was selected to serve on the aging in place and disabilities. They had a task force for that for a couple of years. And listening to that, I think it's making sure money follows the person, that we have the resources and the support system for a person to live independently and support their families to do that. That, to me, that means transportation, you know, really reliable, affordable access to transportation, which can get you not only to work or recreation or doctor's appointments. I think we're still a long way from being where we need to be with that. I think it's also encouraging employers through different programs to go ahead and look beyond their traditional talent pool to overcome what objections or concerns they have, and maybe to incentivize them. I think we have to work on the ability for people to gather and to learn from each other and encourage each other. I worry sometimes that folks with certain challenges, whether that be blindness or hearing, they're isolated and they need to be communal with others. And so it's harder, and I think we need to make efforts to do that. And then look at opportunities for voc rehab so people can learn job skills, can have places to go to work. Most who I interact with want to feel that value. They want to work, they want to be independent. And so for me, that's another thing. What are we doing? How can we improve and encourage that to happen? So those are the 3 things that pop right up to my mind. And the other is to educate others about what we can do, what your community can do.
Absolutely. Again, you took me right into my next question. But before I go there, you talked about you know, really being included. And I think you shared that when you talked about your granddaughters really being, you know, introduced to, you know, disabilities at an early age.
Mhm.
And really understanding it, and understanding that it's not the disability, but it's the value of the person.
Individual.
So that early what we know in the world is early intervention. We really look at it as earlier earlier understanding, and I think if we were able to do that more, and you look at the educational system now, and they're starting to teach elementary school kids different languages because the brain is still developing, and they say that's the best time to learn a new language. And I kind of feel the same way about the disability community or the experience of working with people with disabilities. That earlier that mind is developing, you develop a deeper appreciation for the human and not quote unquote the disability or
Correct.
challenges that person may have. But that takes me right into my next question. And you touched a little bit about this jobs and opportunities for people with disabilities. Uh, what specific policies would you work on to ensure people with disabilities have job opportunities and access to jobs? October is Disability Employment Awareness Month. But what policies would you work on as Lieutenant Governor for the great state of Delaware?
It's one of those coincidental things that share my magazine. I'm a member of the Society for Human Resource Managers, and our last quarterly report talked about unlocking potentials, and it's about challenging HR professionals, to look at the untapped talent and how to bring that talent in. And so, they're working on that untapped talent for both reentry and the disability community. And once again, it comes down to you don't know what you don't know. So we need to educate these employers. And it began with the Department of Labor, really, and having a program out there to encourage employers. There used to be some employer tax credits for some kind of employment decisions that they would make for those like that are coming through vocab or retraining. But I believe awareness is the key step to anything in education. And for people to see that if they're skilled and we can get them some credentials. So I think look at our licensing and credentialing aspect. So when you're looking at an application and you see the credentials and that information, and you don't see what they can't do, you see what they can do. It's changing that focus. And so how can we educate employers, and the state being one of those employers? The state should be a good role model and set the example of what can be done. And then also, I think looking at educational opportunities, how we can have special credentialing available. So I just think once it's the will, there's a way. And I would suggest to you tell me what you think the roadblocks are that we need to remove. Because certainly if transportation is an issue, to working at certain jobs, because all jobs aren't 8 to 4. And a lot of the buses don't run good routes after a certain time. And so if you were able and wanted to work one of those unusual shifts, whether that be in call centers. I mean, we even have call centers now where the blind, one of the not-for-profits is running. So I think it's how to look at what talent do we have, and we certainly need a workforce. So how are we going to match the two together and get rid of the assumptions about what people can and can't do, will and won't do, and maybe a little bit better job with matching them up.
You touched on something that I think is crucial to this conversation. And you said it a couple of times. Really looking at the talent. We as a state, we as a country need to get away from hiring sheets of paper, meaning the bachelor's degree, the associate's degree, not to discredit those from an educational standpoint, but when you add those to a job description as a requirement, and then you add it as a preferred or some other level to basically get rid of people that don't have those degrees, but we have the skill
Yeah.
set. We have the lived experience. As a person with a disability, I always tell people, you can't buy my experience at Amazon.
That's right.
You know, Amazon has a lot of cool stuff. You know, I mean, you can spend your whole paycheck at Amazon, but one of the things you will not find is my lived experience, but also my skill set. And because I have a disability, you may not even find my passion there,
Right.
because it comes from a different source of understanding. But even to that, being a state employee for almost 10 years, one of the biggest barriers, one of the biggest barriers is transportation.
Mhm.
Even as a state employee, one of the challenges is there are a lot of jobs that I could apply for because I got the skill set and the tenure and not only that, but I have the understanding of the state system. But I can't apply for statewide positions because of that transportation barrier. you know, even fleet services, fleet services for state employees, people with disabilities. Yeah, we can book a fleet, but if we don't have a driver or a coworker that's going in the same direction, then we don't get the full benefit of fleet services. So that's just one of the barriers I can think of, but I know there's many. I know we made great strides to, eliminating barriers, but I think that's one of the pieces that because again, transportation is the gateway to everything,
Right.
to education, to employment, to freedom to live, work, play, religious groups. Transportation is the root of everything. And if you don't have reliable, affordable transportation, then you are excluded from the experience of what we call life.
Right.
Because you're alive, but you're not really living until you have access to those root and fundamental rights of it reminds me of the airline. You are now free to move about the cabin. If you
Right.
don't have that, if you don't have that, you don't have the tools to be able to freely move about the cabin. So that was just something I wanted to highlight because I think that is the root of when we look at the unemployment rate for
Mhm.
people with disabilities. It's primarily because of transportation. Maybe you have autism, or maybe you have cerebral palsy or ADHD, and because of that, you may work better at night, but you can't work
Mhm.
at night because fair transit stops running at
Right.
9 o'clock. So you can't work
Or
until
weekends, sometimes they don't offer that on weekends either, and you have an employer and they want you to work a Saturday or Sunday, or you want to go to church on a Sunday or something else, and you can't because there's no public, it's not like there's a voucher system or some kind of thing where if you were to use the private, because we are seeing more private transportation, coming up with, Uber and that kind of stuff, but do they have the ability to transport somebody with special needs with a wheelchair or oxygen or, something else? So, that's why I just think that transportation continues to be, whether it's in the disability community, whether it's in somebody that's coming out of other health issues or substance abuse. I've run in repeatedly, and the further down south we go, Kent, Sussex County, the more difficult it is in our rural areas. When your bus stop is a shoulder of a road or a ditch, that's not very safe.
absolutely. So I know that you used to be a school
Yes.
teacher, so I'm sure you would love the next question. And the next question is really about education. So the question is, how do you plan to ensure that students with disabilities receive the necessary individual supports that they need to be successful?
Honestly, I received an email from a mother this morning that I've tried to help in the past. And she was saying, you tried to help before and my son, he can't go to school. And yet he can't he can't do homebound instruction, and how the system, where the holes in the system are. And I sent a letter to somebody and said, how are we going to fix this? I think we need additional classrooms with specialized instruction, so that children, because we've got 3 different levels in special needs instruction. And I just think, we only have 1 or 2 schools that are specific for that. Some of it's a funding issue on how things are going. Some of it's having the right kind of teacher and staffing to do that. And once again, I need the parents to tell me what's not working and with these IEPs. I think, Emmanuel, almost that every child should have an individualized education plan, every child. And then we portion out who needs what, to get them the resources. So if you have an exceptional child that's, near a genius IQ, we've got a plan for them. And if we've got a plan for a child that might be struggling with speech, that we've got a plan for them. But I just that more, I think, of a round approach. And then we need to look and say, how are we funding? Because you can't have a plan if you're not going to find the money. So that plan includes what resources, what kind of quality teachers do we need to do these programs? And then how do we pay them? When I was teaching, I had high school students primarily, but they asked me one year, would you take some voc rehab students? I said, I'll take any student who wants to come. I taught a medical program, and I had 3 adult students who were had been through, I guess, job injuries or different things, or had some special needs. And I incorporated them right in with my high school students. And it was a wonderful opportunity, especially in a medical program, for those students, the high school students, to be working with those who had come through injuries or different stuff. And sometimes having that adult in the classroom give them some real life experience beyond what I said it was why they needed to pay attention. I always looked at, when they gave me a student with an IEP, that's nice, but I'm going to take that student as far as they can go and want to go. I don't want you to set any barriers up saying, this is what they can do, this is what they can't do. They'll tell me what they can't do. We'll try everything every student's trying. And sometimes we need a little bit longer to learn that. Sometimes we modify how we learn it. But I always felt as a teacher, I was empowered to do that. And I think we need to empower other teachers to have that same mindset, that I'm not going to let a piece of paper or a test tell me what they can and can't. I'm going to look at that individual, and we're going to work. I'll give you an example, if I may. I had a student and he wanted to be a dentist, and he was in one of my classes. I had him for 3 hours a day. And he said, Mrs. King, I need help. And I said, okay. He said, I want to pass driver's ed. And I said, all right. He said, they're not going to let me drive yet, because I've got some issues. So I set up in my classroom a little corner where I had like a mock dashboard and the gear shift and the pedals on the floor. And one of the teachers walked by and said, what are you doing? I said, well, George wants some help getting ready for driver's ed for the practical driving part. And they said, why are you doing that? I said, because George wants to drive. Are you sure you want to do that? I said, I'm not sure what I want, but it's what he wants. And so we're going to practice brake, gas, and we're going to practice these things because that's what he wants. And I think I've always carried that mindset with me, and because nothing was going to matter more to George getting his license when, 16, 17, he wanted his license. That's what he wanted. And God love him, it took him a little bit longer, but he got his license. So I think it's the mindset, Emmanuel. I do.
And you touched on the mindset, and I think that's why it's crucial for, places like the Delaware Development and Disabilities Council, which our requirement is to educate, advocate, and inform. What changes the mind is the heart.
Mhm.
So when we talk to the hearts of people, you don't find a fireman to teach a policeman how to be a policeman. You you go find another policeman to teach him the policeman. So I think that life experience of bringing somebody in with those skill sets, like you said, even pedal in a gear shift. I'm a video game player, so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, let's go get Need for Speed, or let's go get a virtual reality driving course. And there is no expiration date on learning.
Right.
So
I
regardless
think
of
technology is going to be able to do so much to unlock talent for those that have a physical disability in particular, because between augmented or artificial intelligence and what can be done that way, I just see we're going to be able to tap resources like we haven't done before. And
absolutely.
yeah. So I think that's looking at R&D and what are we going to be able to do with technology, is what we can do virtually is going to be tremendous.
Thank you so much for that. So my next question is in regards to mental health. As if you're elected as Lieutenant Governor, what would be your plan to expand mental health services to ensure that people with disabilities that have mental health challenges, when someone calls 911, that they don't go to jail, they get the treatment? We know. I mean, you pick up the newspaper, or you could probably talk to somebody down the street who has experienced the wrong, as I call it, the wrong resources coming to the rescue. But what
So
would be your idea to expand
well, I think
those
for me it would
services?
be to continue that discussion, the efforts that we had done. So 2 or 3 different things play into that. And in Georgetown, it's probably been, which was the district I represented, probably for almost 8 years now, we've seen an increase in the amount of mental health issues untreated. And then that underlying thing that happens is substance abuse and substance dependency. And many times you would think, well, the police are being called, and it's really not a police issue, it's a mental health issue. So over the years, I'd worked on some legislative efforts. And for instance, one of those was to have a more humane treatment. So if somebody arrived in the emergency room and there was a mental, acute mental concern that was going on, would be not to handcuff them and transport them, but to get them to a different, or have some intervention at that point. The other thing we started to do was some trial funding, and Georgetown was one of the first cities where we did that. And that is to actually have a mental health professional ride along with law enforcement on certain calls. I don't think we're going to be able to educate, I think we need to change, which I was part of that law enforcement accountability task force, was to change the training to ensure there's a little bit more related to mental health or other things that are going on, that training, how to intercede. And this is more this issue. Way back in the old days, if the law enforcement would know somebody had an alcohol abuse problem, and they wouldn't keep arresting him. If you ever watch any old of Andy Griffith, when they had the guy that would sleep it off in the cell overnight. But it was that bit of empathy and understanding that there's a difference between committing a crime and then having an underlying issue. So I've worked a lot on putting legislation forward, funding for that as well, because it's one thing to talk about it, it's another to make sure you move the money there. And so I've been served on joint finance and made sure we put money towards mental health counselors in schools, to try and intervene. I think one of the things we can do one of the best things we can do is to prevention and intervention, particularly when it comes to mental health. And we've done a really good job in the last 5 years of letting people know that some of the substance abuse and addiction they see, there's an underlying undiagnosed or unmedicated, in many cases, need. And so I think we're doing a much better job of, instead of putting the stigma on it, to try and get recognized this is an illness, there needs to be resources for the illness. We see the symptoms, Emmanuel, on the streets with homelessness. And I serve on the board for the Community Crisis House, which is transitional and emergency shelters. And most of the folks that come to us in that emergency situation, the underlying issue is some kind of undiagnosed or untreated mental health issue. And getting them the right wraparound services, that makes the difference. And so once again, it's a matter of putting the resources, and in Delaware, getting the qualified professionals. I met a young woman who's actually she's a part of the Dover Police Department, and on her vest it says counselor, mental health counselor. So she might be in that law enforcement uniform, but she is a professional mental counselor and to work on specific issues. And I just think it's a matter of funding. Every police department doesn't have the funds to do that.
Absolutely. You touched on so many different things, but I think the one thing that really stands out the most is to find the appropriate response. You said it a while ago within education about, each student should have an education plan, regardless of what level of education they're on. And I think that's the same way it should be kind of with mental health. If someone has a crisis, maybe they need a plan, a personal centered plan, not some, oh, let me flip through this book and well, you're exhibiting behaviors of a drunk. Let me, go to the drunk category, and this is how I'm gonna, kind of like the old 911 calls when they would teach someone, tell someone how to do CPR, they would flip through the book and read from the book to tell you how to do it. But I think those responses need to be more included, and they're not. People with disabilities are in jeopardy. A couple of years ago, a young man in Wilmington, was in a wheelchair and got shot due to, misunderstanding or lack of resources or lack of knowledge. So I just think mental health is so important for every race, every, being in America. And I don't think there has to always be an alarm of, oh my God, this person has mental health challenges. Because reality is, we all have mental health
That's right.
concerns. And if we don't, then you're not living in the United States. You must be living in some underground, secret society that I don't know about. But if you are in America or across this nation, you are dealing every day to remain focused and go out and go to work every day, get up, repeat it, and do the same thing again. So we're all dealing with that valuable understanding of what mental health looks like. So thank you for highlighting that. We're almost to the end. I just have a couple more questions for you. You touched a little bit about this, the public transportation system, especially paratransit. But what would be some of your plans to improve access to transportation for people with disabilities?
I think one of the things I had mentioned is over the years, there's cheer and Easter seal and chimes, and they all try and run their own special bus program. And in some cases, they do that much more efficiently than the state does through DTC. So I think we need to look at public and private partnerships that can do that, or a means to reimburse other people. Maybe you have a family member that can do that transit for you. There was a group that tried a couple of years ago to start a ride share program in Sussex, and then COVID hit and they sort of got it was difficult to raise funds, especially in the senior citizen community. But I think it's come back to asking you, what do you think, because how we could, if we had a different type of system to identify who needed ride assistance, and, look at it logistically. I think now, as I said earlier, with research and development and so much with technology, there should be a way to come up with a logarithm, some kind of thing that would help us identify who needs what, when, because some of it's on a regular basis. If you have employment or a job, you need this, these hours. Honestly, a few years ago when I was on the autonomous vehicle, they talked that in a few years how that autonomous vehicle would be able to pick somebody up and route them and do things much more efficiently than a bus system. So I think it's just being mindful, starting to collect that data. Who needs transportation, where they need it, and how do we build out those communities?
Absolutely. And as we said earlier, transportation is the gateway to everything. But speaking of chimes and Easter stuff, I think all those places are fantastic. But a lot of us with disabilities don't want to always be tied to a service of some sort. I remember, it's been a while now. I've been married for 15 years now. But I remember when I first met my wife face to face, I got a cousin to take me to her house because I didn't want to show up in a paratransit bus. There's nothing wrong with a paratransit bus, but I would have loved to have had the opportunity to show up in an Uber or show up in some minivan that didn't scream alert, alert, a state-run program was something that looked more natural. I remember going to my prom, and the only way I got to go to my prom was through United Cerebral Palsy. But on the side of the bus, it said United Cerebral Palsy. Now, granted, the driver I had, she decorated the outside and, had all kinds of stuff on it. But in my mind and in my car, I knew that it still said United Cerebral Palsy. Now, granted, I went and I got a good time and I didn't care what was on the side of the bus. But just thinking about the perception of people. People don't listen to what we say, they watch what we do. And because of that, we want to figure out a way to make transportation more natural. I agree in a sense that family members may be able to support, but I would love to jump in a ride share or some other Uber, thing and go to the store without having to call a brother, sister, mom. Maybe I want to run to the store and grab my wife some flowers. But if I gotta get her to drive me, where's the surprise?
Right. Yeah.
So I agree, but I also think there needs to be more natural creation and something doesn't always have to scream disability or special needs. And I'm not a big fan of the word special needs because what we need is not special. It's not special. It is what we need to live, and because that's like calling the watch on your wrist. Oh, that's special. No, you need that to tell time. That cell phone that you talk on, that's not special. You need that to communicate. But I think because when you have a disability, anything you need to support you automatically comes with this stigma of, oh, that's very, very special. No, it's not. I want to work. I want to go to school. I want to breathe. I want to pay my taxes. I want to buy a house. I want to get an apple pie. I want that
Right.
America. I want that American dream. But because I have a disability, everything I do is then seen as special or
Mhm.
extraordinary. When to me, I'm just living my life.
Right. That's why
So
I'd written a note to myself that people need an ILP, an individual living plan.
exactly, there we go. Uh, one of the other questions I had was about housing. The Delaware is in a housing crisis for homelessness, but especially when it comes to affordable, accessible housing for people with disabilities. What would be your plan to improve that and how would you go about working that plan and where do you see we need to go in order to make that plan happen?
We have a real housing almost crisis in Delaware in itself. And people say they see all the building in Sussex County and in around Middletown, and they think we're building, but we're not building units for first-time home buyers. We're not building units for singles. We're not building units for seniors. A lot of the senior living that's needed is much the same as, as a person that has a disability, with elevators are not steps, or being able to get in access ramps, wider hallways. I had worked when I was with the Realtor Association on, encouraging, for the right kind of development for those needs, and those concerns. And we're just, it's not necessarily the price per unit either. They're just, I don't know how to incentivize builders to build for what we need. On the cheer board, which I sit, we're in the process of trying to get the funding in the final phase for 30 new apartments in Sussex. But the waiting list is so long for people that want to live. So my vision, Emmanuel, is they're now building some of these tiny houses, in certain areas. What if we did, some tiny houses that are really have the right size counters and door, everything, but it's going to be difficult. But how could we look at and maybe, develop something along that lines, or apartments, or sometimes it might be, a shared townhouse or shared living that's not a group home, but it's a different, how do we think out of the box as to encourage that kind of independent lifestyle in a home that's accessible. And I think about it, I just don't know how to do that. But what have they done in other areas that we might look at or copy or repeat in Delaware?
Absolutely, thank you for that. And, you one of the most one of the most honest things somebody can say is, I know what needs to be done, but I'm not quite sure how to get us there.
Right.
Uh, but with that being said, how do you plan to involve individuals with disabilities in organizations into developing legislation and policy if you are elected lieutenant governor?
Well, I've always relied a lot on the division of the Disability Council that comes in and and the advocacy group when I was on joint finance, and listening to certain ones, Denise certainly being one of them, Mullins and different, and Mr. Kelly, listening to those come and advocate and, talk about the challenges. And so I yield back to that, is them and their family members who can tell us what they need or what's working and what isn't working. And so that's why I think having those important ongoing discussions and getting resources to look at not just what we're doing in Delaware, what's on the leadership level that's being done in other states that's working well. Sometimes we have to, really look out because we get so used to looking around us, that we don't see possibilities or success out of state. So that's one of the things that I would count on to be lieutenant governors, having that good stakeholder group, asking those questions, making sure we're engaged beyond Delaware.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And you highlighted our culture. our vice chair, excuse me, our vice chair for the Delaware Development and Disabilities Council, Denise McMillan-Powell, who has been a long time activist and advocate for people with disabilities. And I want you to know, if or if not, you are elected, whatever it may be, whatever the results may show. You always have an ally in the DD Council, and our role is to partner with people such as yourself to educate and to advocate and to help build solid legislation and policy. And our doors, our windows, our roof is always open for that partnership. And as the community relations officer, that's part of my job, is to foster those relationships and coming to meetings and sharing knowledge and experience. You know, the good, the bad, the ugly in between to create such a solid policy. So just know that our doors are always open to you. One more final question. And this one is about long-term support services for those with disabilities. And basically the question is, what would you do to improve those long-term supports? And those long-term supports include home care, respite care, and in-home nursing for those that are what we know as medically complex individuals with disabilities. What would be your plan to improve those services for individuals?
Well, I think one of the things is to make sure the money stays with the person and follows the person. And if you look at what it would cost in terms of not only, staffing and money and all that, if you were to institutionalize a person, make that same investment to keep them at home with their family. The thing we did a few years ago was making sure that if a family member was providing services at home, that they could be paid much the same as that, outside person that came in to do that. I was a primary caregiver for my mom for 9 years when she went through dementia and Alzheimer's. And so I know how most families really would like to keep that person at home, but sometimes it's a matter of finding that respite care so that you, the family member, can take care of yourself, can go to shopping or whatever. And it's having that quality program. We're doing a better job of that, but once again, it's the transportation. It's stopping that revolving door. Some folks don't understand that when you're in a homebound kind of situation or relying on somebody for your care, you don't want a different person. You need that continuity of service. I think, again, it's that mindset to understand, having been there and know some of the challenges, to getting that care in the home, to getting that respite so you can have a day off, an hour off, the challenge that you face with that. Finding qualified people, because a big issue had been the pay. I mean, they could go and work in a private practice in a hospital and make a lot more money than coming into that home. And so, because we were still paying at 2008, 2012 rates. So it's looking at those rates, making sure we're compensating to keep those quality people so we can have the respite services, so we can keep people at home, because I think there's no better thing than being able to stay near your loved ones, that support system that you have. And so it's, once again, looking at resources. How do we find the resources, both the talent and then the ability to pay that talent?
Absolutely. You touched on like the payment or how much they make an hour. As a person with a disability, I have lost personal care attendants who decided to go work at Amazon or McDonald's because they were making more money, and the fast food industry for less work. So ever since the pandemic, my wife has been my sole attendant because ever since the matter of fact, a year before the pandemic, I have been unable to hire anyone else because no one wants to work for 11.75 or 12.75. And I know January we're moving to $15. But what's gonna happen when we move it? The other jobs ain't gonna do nothing but offer people more money. So I think that healthcare crisis will continue until we figure out a way to not only recruit people, but um keep the people once we get them, and then making sure that they have a retirement plan, even
Mhm.
if they are taking care of a loved one. I've been married for 15 years, and my wife's been taking my caregiver probably for 13 of those. But if I were to pass away tomorrow or today, she has no retirement or no other financial backing. But you look at other jobs, and if you work those jobs for 10 years, you at least have 401k.
Right. I
So
had a very senior lady that lived in my district had come to me, and she had wanted to get some assistance from the state. And they told her, because her adult disabled son still lived with her, he wasn't able to live on his own. And they counted the disability as her total income. And so she made $30 too much to get any of the other assistance, household assistance that would have really benefited her because of his disability income. Well, it doesn't seem to me that's fair, because that disability income isn't earned income. Do you know what I'm saying? And so they were holding that as a reason for her not to get any kind of public assistance. And she couldn't work. She was in her late 70s, and it just seemed wrong. And so that's one of the things I'd like to look at, is how we do that, make those decisions.
absolutely, thank you so much. A well-rounded answers, and thank you for taking the time out.
My pleasure.
Before we go, I want to remind everyone, if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that bell somewhere over here on the screen. I don't know which way, but make sure you ring that bell. You ring that bell so you never miss an episode of Let's Talk About It. My name is Emmanuel Jenkins, and again, I am here with one of the candidates, the Lieutenant Governor, for this upcoming election for the state of Delaware. If you are not excited about voting, give me a call so I can rough you up a little bit and let you know that your vote is your voice. And we hope to see you at the polls. Miss Ruth, thank you again for your
Thank
time.
you.
Everyone in Cyberland, thank you for your time. Be safe and be well until we meet again.
Thanks.
Well, bye bye, everyone.
Bye.